My name is Jason Buss. I'm a developer here at Customer FX, and as Brandon mentioned, we're going to be taking a look at using nested payloads and queries using SData for the SData API for SalesLogix. Initially, this is going to be the first part in probably 2 or 3 different workshops. We're just going to get started in this one with an example of sort of a basic application to read account data via a LAN application built in C#. And in further webinars, this we'll expand on this a little bit and make it a little bit more of a more dynamic and useful application. At this point, we're going to talk a little bit about the SData core specifications as well as nested payloads. However, we're not going to be dealing with them too much in this application initially. We'll get into those a little bit more in the next one. But to get started on a basic application, just as a platform to have a couple more of these in the future, and give you an example of using SData in an external application. So right now, let me get my screen shared here. Oops. Okay, so right now, okay, I have everything going. Okay, so right now we're just going to, I'm going to start just by starting a Visual Studio application. Now, the last webinar we had, we talked a little bit about using Nuget to bring in the SData core functionality. We're going to do that today as well. So essentially here, I'm going to create a new Windows Form application, and I'm just going to call this SData SalesLogix. So I'll start this up. And just have to give it a second here. Okay, so initially we're going to have to add, let's see, oh, that's interesting. I seem to have lost my Nuget package manager, so let me see if I can get this back in here. Oops, sorry, wrong thing. Well, it appears to be installed, so I'm not sure why that's not showing up. Let's refresh this here. Let me start a new application and make sure we're not missing something. While this is loading, just talk briefly about essentially what we're doing with SData. And when we say we're getting data from SData, what we're doing typically is getting, well, there are basically 3 core parts to what we're doing. We're getting a feed of entries, or an ATOM feed, which is basically a collection of ATOM entries, which is a record containing a payload of, essentially it's just key value pairs containing property names and the value for the property. These properties may sometimes contain an embedded payload. An embedded payload would be an item such as like account manager or address or contact in relation to account. And you can define whether or not you want to include those or not. As I mentioned before, we probably won't get into those practically too much here, but we'll talk about them briefly in our application. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now I have an application, and for some reason now I have my Nuget packages available again, so I'm going to right-click that. And once this opens, I can just do a search for SData. And that'll allow us to add the SData C# client library into our system. And I think actually we may already have this installed in this one. Yes. Okay, so now that we have that in place, I'm going to add just a few controls on here. Let's start with a list box. This will be where we actually display our data. Essentially what we're going to do is we're just going to be querying the database for account information and then just list that data in this box. So in addition to that, we want to be able to add some criteria to search for. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a text box and throw that in there, and then a button as well. Oops. Don't worry too much about making it pretty at this point in time. Okay, so now that we have our application, sort of our interface initially built, we can start adding some items in here. The first thing we're going to do is we need to define, we need to set up our connection or initialize our SData service. In order to do that here, we're going to go ahead and just create a variable, create a service variable. And that is a, you know what, I'm sorry, we're missing a couple of using statements. In addition to adding the reference to the C# client library, we're going to want to add a couple different references here as well. And those are going to be, whoops, we're going to add Sage, SData, I'm not sure why this isn't quite working for me here. No, I apologize. Let me just try this one more time. I'm having a little bit of problem with Visual Studio. So once again, I'm going to create a new Windows Form application. I think we're okay on the framework. Just going to call it SData App at this point. Unfortunately, this is not quite working for me. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, instead of running on this machine, is run this on a different machine. So just bear with me one second. Okay, so I've kind of switched here from Visual Studio 2010 to 2012. I hope that's not too confusing with what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go ahead here and create a new project. And again, we'll call this Windows Form application. Let's call that SData SalesLogix app. Okay, so I'll go ahead and save this. Excuse me. Okay, now that we have this in place, I'm going to go to References, and I'm going to go to Manage Nuget Packages. Sorry for repeating myself on some of this, but this seems to be working a little bit better for me on this machine. Okay, so here, again, I'm just going to look up SData, which I can now install. And go ahead and close this. And once again, I'll have to add in my controls here. So we're going to again add a list box into here, as well as a text box. Like so, and a button. Okay, so now that we have that in place, we can actually hopefully actually get something to work here. I'm going to need to add my using statements again as well. We'll see for sure now if it's actually working for me. Yeah, okay. So we're going to add Sage, SData, client, and core. This gives us sort of the core functionality for SData. And a couple more items. We're going to use Sage, SData, client, and Atom feed. Or Atom, sorry. This allows us to work with the Atom feeds that is returned to us via the payloads in SData. And then finally, we'll add Sage SData client extensions. This allows us to call extension services through the SData functionality as well. Okay, so now that those are in place, I can finally actually initialize my connection. And let's see here. So we're going to go ahead and create a service variable. It's a new SData service. And now to connect, we're going to go ahead and this is basically just the URL to the publish SData service. We're going to basically hard code in login information at this early stage, and then in the future we'll actually make that a little more dynamic. But at this point, I just need to do localhost. I don't think. Actually, I don't need to throw a port in here if it's just on port 80, which it is in my case. And then the rest of our connections. SData is the SData portal, which is deployed. There's a couple other items that are in the URL, which I'll kind of describe a little bit here as I'm going in. The next item is XLX. This just indicates that we're connecting to the SalesLogix application. SData can be used in a couple different Sage products, and some of those other products like Mass have different data sources that you can call. In SalesLogix, that doesn't really apply, so it's always just going to be SLX for SalesLogix. And then finally, dynamic. And dynamic just refers to the dynamic entities with SalesLogix, and those are the entities that you can modify and add properties and items to, such as like account and contact and so on. The other option would be system, which would be things like pick lists and so on. But in this case, we're just going to use dynamic. And then finally, that goes on the end. And the rest of this is just our login information. As I said, we're just going to hard code this in. So I'm just going to throw an admin. And this has no password on it, so I'll throw that in as well. Or no password. Okay, so now that we have our service variable set up, we need to create a resource collection request. Now, basically, there are two different ways to read data from SData. You have what's called a single resource request, and that's going to be used anytime you want to just return a single piece of data. If you wanted to return multiples and you used a single resource request, you're going to get an error in there. So when you use a single resource request, you're going to get back, instead of a feed, you'll actually just get back a single Atom entry. The other method to do it, which we're going to do here initially, is a resource collection request. And the resource collection request will return to you a feed of Atom entries, of multiple Atom entries that you can then iterate through and use as you need to. So what we're going to do then is go ahead and create that resource collection request. So now we'll just do a new variable. This will be our request variable. And resource collection request. And we're just going to pass the service variable that we had defined earlier. Now that we have that created, likes that. Okay, so this is essentially this essentially is the request to the database. However, this won't do anything until we call a read method from this, which we'll get to in a second. Our next thing we have to set, is a resource kind, and basically the resource kind is the entity that you're looking to return. So in this case, we're going to just define this as accounts. Now, basically, what we're returning here, this is the entity we're going to, and if you're never or if you're ever not sure what we're looking for in this case, if you look in the application architect in SalesLogix, and you go to a particular entity, they're always going to have this SData tab, and if you look at that tab, you see this path name. And for account here, which we're looking at, it's accounts. So we know that. So if we want to return account information, this is the path that we're going to, the path name that we're going to be using. It's important to keep this in mind. If you do have external applications built on this, and this is changed, it's going to end up breaking your application. So it's it's important that for sort of the default standard entities, that you probably don't want to mess around with these too much if you've done a lot of work in external applications. Alternatively to looking here, you can also actually just go. You can actually directly open the URL that you're going to. Actually, just scratch the rest of this here. And so here I'm just going to my localhost SData SLX dynamic, and this will return basically the entities that are available to you from here. And of course, it takes a little doing to parse through all this stuff, but you can get an idea of here of what's available. So here we have accounts, account summaries, and so on. To go back to our application, we've defined our resource or our entity, which is accounts. Now we have a couple other options. We're going to want to put in some query values, or in this case, we'll just use one query value, because we're going to have, we're going to allow people to enter in a value and then search based, when clicking this button. So basically, from our request, we're going to add a query value. Excuse me, and just add one here. We'll just do a where. And in this case, we're just going to go account name, like, and then we'll just return the value of our text box. Oops. Okay. Need to throw that in here as well. Now, basically, this is just a very simple example of how to add a query value or criteria into this. One of the things that I want to show you as well is that there is Sage does publish the core specifications of SData, and that's going to contain a lot of different information, including what can go into a query language. And if we actually look at the samples up here, we can see that ultimately in the URL, this is how these are usually implemented. You have everything up to your entity. In this case, their entity is customers, and then a question mark, and then they start throwing their criteria in as well. So it really, in our case, if I went ahead and just type this in manually, well, if I just do accounts, it'll show me a feed of account information. As we can see here, we have actual account names and various other information. But then, we could also do we can actually add a where criteria, which I already have saved one here, where we do account name like, and then I just manually threw in an AB. So now we're seeing Abbott Limited as an example, and if we scroll down, we should see a different one here as well. Abbott Worldwide, and so on. So essentially in the URL, this is all that's getting passed through. But as far as the application goes, we just do it by adding query values in the way that I'm showing here. There's a couple other things that we can set in here. We don't necessarily need to. We can do a select in here. Basically, without doing this, we're returning everything in the Atom feed. As I showed you in this feed, it has properties for pretty much every exposed property within account, which may not be something you want to do. You may want to limit that to only certain fields, which will serve to kind of speed things up a little bit in your application. In order to do that, just to show you. We basically just add a select in here as well. Oops. Actually, I don't even think we need a select for this, or an add for that. And then you would just do a select, and then by whatever field you wanted to do in there. In this case, you could do account name. I'm not going to include this in here for now, but I will leave it into the code. Just commented this out. Okay, in addition, you can do things such as an order by, and then this is basically just, again, we're adding to the query values. We'll do an order by and account name. Now, all of these items, these like the order by and the where, and basically what's defined in the query, this is what we have, or this is what is shown in the query language specifications. They have this. This is a good reference, definitely, if you're going to be doing stuff like this. And you know, we'll be providing the links, by the way, to these sites after probably in a group email here after this webinar. But this shows various things, some literals that you do. If you wanted to do it based on a date, you know, this would be the format that you would need to send it in. And there should be some operators and string functions in here as well. But what we're seeing as far as the select and the wheres and the ordered by, those are all defined in that core specification as well. Another option you have, and it doesn't really apply to what we're doing here in this initial webinar, but you can also set up your includes in here as well. And as I mentioned in here, as I mentioned before, an include basically defines whether or not you're using nested payloads. For example, we're calling accounts, but if you wanted to get address information as well, you would do that via an include, or contact information, or whatever may be related to the account. So if we did want to do that, we can just do an add again, along with an include, and then whatever entity we wanted to include with that. In this case, I'll just do contacts. So it would look like that if you wanted to include multiple items. I believe you would actually just do that sort of thing here, contacts, addresses. For the purposes of this app, we don't really need this, so I'll comment that out as well. Now that we really have everything we need to have defined in there, it's really just a matter of calling the read request on our SData feed, and then to use that data as you know, whatever way is appropriate for what we're doing. So basically, we're just going to create a feed variable, and that will just call read from here. And essentially, this is the whole request. And at this point, it's just us consuming that request. So basically, now what we're going to do is just do a for each loop here. So basically, for each atom entry in the feed that we've created, we're going to just go through this and stuff this into our list box. So now that we have this in place, we're going to need to create a variable for our payload. And we'll just do get SData payload. So this will add this into our payload variable, and now we can retrieve values from there as well. So we're going to do, we're just going to grab our account name, and that'll just be from our payload again, and we want to call values from there, and then we can just get our account name. Whoops, Okay. Now, addition, if we ever wanted to get an ID is a little bit of a different case. It doesn't actually exist as part of the payload. It's more in the header of the payload. Actually, if we look at what actually gets returned here, let's see. Yeah. So for this particular account that I'm looking at now, we have our basically shows the header for the payload that we've received, and we'll see that we have a key here which represents the account ID. That doesn't actually show up in this area along with the other properties. So if we want to get our key, we have to refer to that as such, as the key from the payload. So if I go back here, we're just going to get our payload ID. I'm sorry, payload key. So now basically we have variables containing the account name and the ID for each time we loop through the Atom feed. So now that we have that, basically all we need to do now is just go to our list box, and we'll add items, and we're just going to add ID. Just going to throw this in here like this. Okay, so that should basically be all we need here to return that data. I have to make one change here, which isn't necessarily important to note, but the machine I'm now working on, since my other one wasn't working, doesn't actually have something here on localhost, so I'm going to have to throw in a different value, which is actually an IP address to another machine. Oops. Otherwise, when we run this, nothing will happen because it won't actually have a published SData feed in the location I was already at. 16.242.109. Okay. Okay, so basically now that that's done, we should be able to run this. And see what happens. Okay, so now we got our form. I'm just throwing in A, press our button. And it had a problem with something. Oh, let's see what I did wrong here. Bear with me just 1 second. Okay, let me try this one more time. Okay. I'm not quite seeing the problem, but fortunately I have another version of it here. Let's try this one instead. Okay, so now as we see, as I press the button, it's displaying the ID and the name from basically everything that starts with an A in the database. So that worked on that one. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to do something else here. Let me just try to fix one thing. just trying to see what happened in my original code here. Okay, that seems to be working better. I must have had a typo in there that I just missed. Okay, so now my original application here is working. Okay, so that's basically using the excuse me, basically using the resource collection request to return a bunch of information. What I'd also like to demonstrate is using the single resource request, and to do that, basically we're just going to add another text box in here as well. And that will contain basically all we're going to do here is just set it up so that when you click on an item in the list box, it'll go ahead and just populate some additional data in this text box as well. Not particularly helpful, but just for the sake of demonstration, I'll just show how this works. Okay, so basically now we're going to want to add on the selected index change event here for the list box, so that when we click on it, something will happen. Basically, we're going to be doing a lot of the same things that we had done before. First of all, we're going to want to grab the ID that we had previously populated in the list box. So I'll just go ahead and throw this in here. That'll be the selected item. String. And we'll just grab the substring, the first 12 characters, which will be the ID. Okay. Now basically we're going to be doing we're going to be kind of doubling up on some code here. In this case, we're going to reuse the service request just to save some time. And now for our request, this will be a little bit different because now we're going to be using a SData single resource request. Since we're just going to be returning one data element from here. So we'll pass service to that as well. Oops. One extra double quote I didn't need. Okay, and again, we'll want to set our resource kind. And the one difference here with a single resource request is we have to use something called a resource selector to define what exactly we're going to be returning. So in this case, we want to pass the ID to that. So we'll go for our resource selector, and then we'll have to pass this in single quotes, which will just be the ID that we have previously grabbed. So we'll get that in place. And then finally, an entry variable. So we'll have that there. And then another payload. Oops. Okay, and then finally, I don't want to make sure. Okay, yep. Didn't recall if I had added the text box there or not, but we have that there. So we're just going to go ahead and set the text property of this text box to our payload values, and we're going to return the account name. And just for the heck of it here, we'll go ahead and return another piece of data here. Why don't we grab the, let's see, values. We'll just go ahead and grab the main phone as well. And that is about it. So really, in terms of the code, using the single resource request versus the resource collection request, it's very similar, except we're defining a resource selector, and of course we can only return one piece of data. So we'll go ahead and run this. So now, if I throw in a value here, should get a list of AB accounts, and selecting one should give us the value in this text box, Abbott Worldwide, with the phone number for it as well. So that is basically what we can do in a very simple, sort of basic starting level as far as returning data from the SData portal, or I'm sorry, from the SData client. And what we're going to do in future webinars is we'll expand this a little bit. We're going to touch a little bit more on actually using nested payloads, maybe showing account contact information, and we'll also start to get a little bit into actually posting data to the database using this. But as a sort of a starting application, I think this is basically where we're going to stop. So just to kind of look here as well, or just as a reminder, we're going to be giving you as well the find the right thing here, the URL for this the course specifications provided by Sage, so you can take a look at some of those items. I'm also going to zip up and post the actual code that I've written here today, and we're also going to put a recording of this up on our YouTube channel for review, which will come in handy if somebody wasn't able to attend this webinar and wanted to go to the next one, or if the next webinar, you can certainly we'll record that, and you could view that if you want to continue to follow along with what we're doing with this application. So at that point, I'm not seeing